There, just put it on the chair.
The prime number cross. So you've seen an image of it. You've had a rough breakdown of the structure that's in the numbers themselves. And literally you'd be going for hours and you'd be amazed by it. But that's the basics of it. In reality, if that was the prime number cross that you're seeing there, yeah, if that was it, in reality you actually have to imagine two intersecting. See, let's fall down, let's start, just like that. Alright? So you have two come apart. Two-dimensional planes.
Yeah.
In spin. These numbers are energies and they're spinning. And they intersect like that to create four-dimensional space as you know it. And you're aware of three of those dimensions, but the fourth one is there. And as I say, you can prove this just by logical thought. You can't perceive the third unless you're in the fourth already. That's certainly where your mind is. When you communicate with your higher self, it's four-dimensional. It's a digital communication. It's instantaneous. It's not analog. Analog is the three dimensions we live in. So the brain is a digital computer. But I thought I'd show you this because that is the structure of space. Alright? Four-dimensional infinite space around a point. And in this case, every point of intersection of the mirror. So what I'm saying is, that's a model of four-dimensional space. We exist in the intersection. That's reality to us, the intersecting. Alright. That's a little graphic of it. It's called x squared, y squared geometry because everything on the intersection does not possess a z-axis. You know, x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis.
So we're in that line there.
You're in that line there.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So, you know, some people say the universe is holographic. We're a holographic projection. We're not, but it's pretty, the basis of holography is the same. And then you have two beams coming together and they intersect at 90 degrees to create a resonance. So holography is not a holographic world, as it were, but the process by which things are created is very similar. So I don't dispute the holographic theory. The holographic theory that was used to make you think that someone's up there projecting you and nothing you think or do is original to you. It all comes, where do thoughts come from? The moment someone can convince you that you're not even having your own thoughts, good luck with that trip, because it only ends one way. Dr. John Dee's magical mirror. So during Queen Elizabeth's first visit to John Dee's home, it's recorded that he brought out the magical mirror given to him by Sir John Pickering. It was actually held for a time up in Alnwick Castle, I think. They won't let me in. I think they've got the original. I do. They won't let me in up there. And notice which castle, of course, became the place for Harry Potter. Yeah. So anyway, it was to Her Majesty's great contentment and delight that he demonstrated it to her. Other references to this occasion describe how the Queen marvelled at the image as it reached out with the same hand as she presented to it. Imagine you're in front of the mirror, shake hands with yourself, doesn't work. Does with this mirror. Show you that at the end, as I say. So it's all very vague, but from the descriptions you can find that they're clearly referring to mirrors based on x squared, y squared geometry, which is constructed from an understanding of prime numbers. Everything John Dee ever wrote down, you are told, is about occult stuff, but it's clearly about prime numbers. Alright? And numbers generally. I've got 17 slides of all of his stuff on, and there's like every sentence in it is numerus primus, or 3, or 5, or it's code. It's not occult. In Plato's Timaeus, he describes a reflective surface consisting of two mirrors at right angles. Such a mirror reverses its image in space and always gives 3 reflections. From the center of the mirror space is broken up at right angles into 4 quadrants. Because infinite prime number space exists around every point, This space has a strange angular dimensional geometry of true intersecting planes. These intersecting planes are visibly demonstrated by Plato's mirror. This space mirror effectively makes it possible to see a hidden phenomena such as a mental picture or an idea. And it's not just you who sees it, it's those who are watching you see it between your head and the mirror. Plato's receptacle from Timaeus. And the best way to understand the receptacle is remembering that the sensible world is an image of the living creature. Any image must be in another, for example. A reflection is in a mirror. Hence, beside the living creature and its image, there had to be something in which the image was created. This was called the receptacle of becoming. It's space. That's what he was talking about, arguably. The four-dimensional infinite space around the point, every intersection of, down the intersection of the two planes, does not possess a z-axis. It's only x squared, y squared geometry. This notion of four dimensions has nothing to do with the popular combination of physics of three dimensions with one of time. Nothing to do with that at all. Infinite empty space always has a quadruple structure because the world is always a two-dimensional squared thing. Four quantum numbers of electrons must in fact be a geometrical necessity. That's why there's four quantum numbers. So far this has only been empirical knowledge derived from experience. Because there are two forms of space, which when they come together like that, there must also be a life form for each space prescribed by mathematics. Who do you think you're communicating with when you cross into that dimension with your brain, which is tuned, it's a four-dimensional computer, based on a geometric form that the author, Plichter, had seen on his brother's uniform when he worked for the St. John's Ambulance. Is actually the cross of the Order of Knights Templar. Now, has anyone heard of Q? QAnon?
Yeah.
I nearly brought a picture the other day. They released a picture of the Red Cross, the symbol of the Red Cross. It's the reverse of the Swiss. Red on white, white on red. It's the same thing. The Red Cross was formed by the Knights Hospitaliers. They took all the money off the Templars when the Templars were done in back in Friday the 13th, 1307. That's why Friday the 13th is in history. An unlucky day for some, and all the money was given to the Pope. He then gave it to the Knights Hospitaliers, who are today the Red Cross. Now, hard to say as I'm talking about the Red Cross, but you might think it's a great organisation, and it does do a lot of great work. There's no getting away from it. But its main function is money laundering across frontiers. Just en frontière. Yeah? No frontiers. Smuggling children, selling of body parts. This is a ridiculous thing for you to. You're going to see it in America very soon, coming out public. The Red Cross is in the hands of your elite controllers, and corrupt is not the word for it. It's if you ever want to see evil, you're seeing it incarnate in organisations like that. Not the good people who work in it, but at the top. Trust me, God. There we go. People see visions, hypnagogic images when gazing into a transparent or reflective surface. It's a well-established fact and can be regarded as an item of firm psychological knowledge. It's a fact. Jesus scribed the future. It was part of his religion. That surprises most Christians. So why wouldn't John Dee? Now in Genesis, it refers to a silver cup that was used by Jesus for divining the future and its theft. This is what it said. And when they were gone out of the city and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, Up, follow after the men. And when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, Wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? Is not this it from which my Lord drinks, and by which indeed he divines? You have done evil in doing so. They stole his cup. That's the response. That was his divining cup. And there's many, many other references to this. There's no doubt that if Jesus was real, he was into these secrets in a big way. That which is called the occult today.
cult just means hidden though, doesn't it? It doesn't mean
Yeah.
secret, it just means it's hidden.
Yeah, I couldn't dispute that. So, we've looked at Hermetica, the corpus Hermeticum, we've looked at prime numbers and the cross. There's a similarity between them. The existence of all things that are would have been impossible if space had not existed as an antecedent condition of their being. For if anything is to exist, space must be provided beforehand. If things were nowhere, their properties, magnitudes, positions and operations would not be discerned. That's from Hermetica, for God's sake. You can argue when this was written, but it was at least 500-600 years ago, and certainly drawn from much more original materials. Plichter says four-dimensional space requires, by its very nature, points of finite size. This is why we have atoms that are finite. Particles did not emerge at some time in the past, but instead exist because of the nature of infinity. That is the structure of space itself. Is there anything bigger than infinity? Can you think of anything?
Infinity plus one.
That's actually not so bad. Now you've got, there's three infinities really: space, time, numbers. There's the three infinities you can think about. Take one, numbers. Think of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way infinite, yeah? Never ending. So that's an infinite set in mathematics. Infinite set of numbers. And yet, if you were to reciprocate all of those numbers, so just take 2 for example and put 1 over it, it becomes a half. And 3 becomes a third, 4 becomes a fourth, 5th, 6th, 7th. That infinite set is going to be the same size as the set of whole numbers, isn't it? Because you're just putting 1 over each of those whole numbers. It's the same size of infinite set. What about decimal fractions? You don't just have a half and a quarter, you have 0.51, 0.52, 0.53. That's a bigger infinite set than the first infinite set. So don't ever presume that infinity is equal always. It's not. That's what mathematicians kind of know. Anyway, just thought I'd chuck that bit in. If matter did not exist, not one single atom, there would also be no space. But if only the two of them can exist together at the same time, then one would have to be the other, only reversed. Where there is no movement, there is also no time. Time is just movement. Energy can therefore be nothing else than the reverse of time. All you energy healers in here, any of you, try doing this in front of energy healers. They go, oh. But you need to think about that. That is what energy is. No one can tell you what energy is. I just did. It's the reverse of time. The reciprocal of time. Time. And 1 over time is energy. But you need to think about that. That is what energy is. No one can tell you what energy is. I just did. It's the reverse of time. The reciprocal of time. Time. And 1 over time is energy. That's, I'll just emphasise this bit. 2 physical spaces have to exist. The 4-dimensional space around a point transports electromagnetic waves according to the order of whole numbers. If a 3-dimensional body is filled with air in such a 4-dimensional space, such as we live in, this air will transport heat or sound according to the order of the reciprocal numbers, the fractions. Both spaces are pure inversions. Remember I started by showing you the number 6, with 1 over 6 being a 6th, and 6 squared being 36. That's what it's saying there. Both spaces, both types of space, are the reciprocal opposites of the other. And based on 1, 2 and 3 and the number 8, so that's the octave formation. So what? Well, the revelation of a universal plan will force scientists and theologians to review their vanity and give every lay person the chance to inquire into the matter of whatever degree, to whatever degree they like. It will be freeing. I mean, I don't know if it's dawning on you, but this shows, this proves, beyond sacred geometry, that the universe itself is intelligent. And it's not complex. It's based on an additive system. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in the very number system that you were born with, or that anyone was born with. A counter argument to that is someone could say, well, hang on, we didn't invent those numbers, those symbols. 0 wasn't invented until a few hundred years ago, and this. That's irrelevant. In reality, you've got nothing, or you've got one thing, or you've got two things. Doesn't matter what symbols you put to them. It was beyond God's power to put stop to evil and expel it from the universe, for evil is present in the world in such sort that it is manifestly an inseparable part thereof. But the Supreme God provided and guarded against evil as far as he reasonably could. I'm convinced it's a she. It had to be. But a bloke wouldn't hang testicles between his thighs. God was a woman. By deigning to endow the minds of men with intellect, knowledge and intuition. It is in virtue of these gifts that we stand higher than the beasts, and by these and these alone that we're enabled to shut the traps and the deceptions and the corruptions of evil. I was naive about this thing called evil decades ago.
Probably best.
It's real. Well, you've seen what people can do. If that's not evil, you don't need a Satan figure to do it. The evil is within, and when it is released, wow, it's in everyone, and that's your job. Is
Well,
to
so is the light,
keep
isn't
down.
it?
Yes,
To be fair.
absolutely.
That's, yeah.
But don't lose sight of the fact that it's balanced by powers that can be frightening. So, Littlewood's law, given the number of hours so that we're awake every day, assuming that an event takes... Let me step back from this. In reading this out, it dawns on me that some people might think, well, this is a mechanistic view of the world, isn't it? It's all down to numbers, and you're saying there's no miracles. No. I'm saying that nature itself is constructed in such a way that these miracles will happen to you. And if they don't, there's something wrong. Okay? Imagine something happened yesterday. You won a lottery. The odds were 15 million to 1 against you. So it's never really going to happen. But today you can look back and see that it did happen. The only thing you can't do is predict when they're going to happen. Till you look in the space mirror. One of you's going to win the pools this week. The pools. Do you remember that?
Littlewood's pools.
You're there. Oh, yeah, he's awake. So, given the number of hours we're awake and assuming that an event takes only 1 second to occur, if you calculate the odds of any particular event happening to be, say, 1 in a million, you'd expect that thing to happen about once every 35 days. With 7 billion people on Earth, the chance that an event with 1 in a million won't happen is that. That's just, can't even contemplate the size of that number.
Huge number.
So, the truly unusual day would be a day when nothing unusual. Whoever, whatever creates this reality has done it to incorporate, quite literally, miraculous occurrences. All right, it's not mechanistic at all. So we looked at the number 2732. It keeps cropping up. I kept your attention away from it earlier, but it's been in a few times. Absolute zero, minus 273.2 degrees. Sidereal month, 27.32. The ratio, oh, we'll miss that one. That's the missing capstone of the Freemasons. Earth's orbit around the Sun, 366 days. No, it's not, you say, but if you step off the planet and measure against the sidereal stars, the background, it is 366 days. 1 over 366 gives you that. That's the number of days that this planet did have in a year originally, before it slowed down after this cataclysm. Okay? And the cataclysm itself, I think, moved the Earth to a factor of 0.2732. It's all in these numbers. But I think I can prove it later on. So, 1 over 2732 equals 366. Notice that. That doesn't happen with all other numbers. 1 over 366 gives that. Forget the decimal points. Scalar physics, you see. Scale, it scales up and down. Drop the decimal points. 2732, 1 over 366. The days in a year. 1 over 2732 gives you 366. We're in a reciprocal lock with the moon and the sun. Statistical average female hormone cycle, 27.32 days, and therefore gestation period, 273 days. These are statistical averages, and this is where the numbers always come out. Statistical averages. Here's the key one. The ratio of pi to 4 is 1.2732. There's the number again. So whenever this occurs, it's because of pi. The moon's acceleration relative to the Earth, 273 centimeters a second squared. Radius of the moon is 0.273 Earth radii. Professor Tom, some of you may have come across his stuff, he's a great megalithic man from 80 years ago. Proved that the megalithic yard was 2.732 feet. What's the chances of that? Gas expands or contracts by 1 over 273.2 of its volume for every degree of heat. These are facts you can check. And here's the one that no one knows. This is my work, this bit. The slope angle of the Great Pyramid is such that, and that's a formula, which says the square on the base has a length equal to that of the circle's perimeter, whose radius equals the pyramid's height. 51.51 degrees, thus phi and pi are integrated at this unique slope angle, and the natural cotangent of the slope angle is 1.2732. They built the damn pyramids to reflect that number after the cataclysm, or before it, or whatever. It's hard to pin down. They're actually telling you how much Earth changed by as a result of a cataclysm that hit it.
Why would that be important?
This is the geometry of it. They built these things to find out how the Earth had changed, which tells you they didn't have spaceships and could flit off and check it. They had to do the calculations from ground. They might have had spaceships before then, but this cataclysm was huge, and I believe the original one was actually created when the Earth, which was with Mars and Venus under Saturn as a sun, moved into this solar system, in Sol, this sun.
Talking about Tiamat, modern.
As it moves in, as this moves in, Saturn was a brown dwarf star. Still is. It was lit then. It's not lit now. In fact, history tells you it was flitting off into the distance when it went out. But this solar system, under Saturn's sun, moved in, came across the solar system we're in now. At which point the plasma field around that brown dwarf, and all brown dwarfs have one, would have become transparent. It would have lost its opacity. And if you'd been on Earth at that time, you literally might just have said, "Let there be light," because you hadn't seen it before, not under a Saturnian sun. All right? I honestly believe that is what happened, and it wasn't all that long ago. And there were giants, incidentally. I'm quite convinced of that. I think you walk on them quite often. You see, life back then under the Saturnian sun was actually silica-based. Not carbon-based like you, it was silicon-based and carbon. Trees, silicon trees reaching miles of height. And I do believe they were lived in. I believe they were lived in by the things that you would call elves, who to this day are the Albigensians. And there would be ground dwellers too. The ground wouldn't be a very good place to live, because there were huge things down there. So where would you go? Well, you'd do what the dwarves did, and you'd live underground. And this is where Lord of the Rings came from. Tolkien was into this understanding. What I'm saying is it's real. And that's why the occult worships the Saturnian sun, which became Satan to the Christians.
Black sun.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that 2732 number, and it's profound. So I was talking about monatomic gold to someone before, but we'll come to that. So Philalethes, who was revered by Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle and Elias Ashmole, I had 3 past life regressions in my life as a result of a medium telling me who I was in a previous life. And my response was, who the fuck's that? I'd never heard of the guy. There. So I'm not saying that I'm Elias Ashmole. I've just been told by 3 mediums in my life that I was Elias Ashmole.
Go on, son, still
He was the first Freemason in Britain, by the way. Ashmolean Museum, he set up a museum of things of interest which was free to the public, so that the elites aren't the only ones who get to see them. He would have had your giant in there. That was what Ashmole wanted. Ashmole was also the biographer. He wrote the entire life of John Dee and his studies. Apparently it doesn't exist. I know it exists, and it's locked away, and I'd kill to see it, but there you go. This is where my interest in John Dee came from, I suspected. But anyway, I'm not making silly claims. I was just told that. So we discussed right. He made the point that the stone was itself made from gold, and that the philosopher's art was in perfecting this process. He said, our stone is nothing but gold digested to the highest degree of purity and supple fixation. It is called stone by virtue of its fixed nature, so it's not a stone. It resists the action of fire as successfully as any stone. In species it is gold, more pure than the purest. It is fixed and incombustible like a stone, but its appearance is that of a very fine white powder, monatomic gold. When the influence of the atomic core is extended to incorporate all the electrons in it, they fall apart. In atomic size powder, basically. Gold turns into white powder. This was known back then. It's actually in the Bible as well. On top of the mountain of God, you know, when was it Moses? Moses. Abraham went up the mountain. Moses, thanks, yeah. Up the mountain, and there he met God, and they on the tablets and all this stuff. That place was uncovered by Flanders Petrie 100 odd years ago, and when they got there, they gold digested to the highest degree of purity and supple fixation. It is called stone by virtue of its fixed nature, so it's not a stone. It resists the action of fire as successfully as any stone. In species it is gold, more pure than the purest. It is fixed and incombustible like a stone, but its appearance is that of a very fine white powder, monatomic gold. When the influence of the atomic core is extended to incorporate all the electrons in it, they fall apart. In atomic size powder, basically. Gold turns into white powder. This was known back then. It's actually in the Bible as well. On top of the mountain of God, you know, when was it Moses? Moses. Abraham went up the mountain. Moses, thanks, yeah. Up the mountain, and there he met God, and they on the tablets and all this stuff. That place was uncovered by Flanders Petrie 100 odd years ago, and when they got there, they found vats of white powder, which just blew away because they didn't know what it was. That was where they were making the monatomic gold to feed the god kings of those days. All right, and the king of the mountain was known as Bel Alazel, yeah, something like that. This became Azazel, the demon in Christian mythology. They say God was on top of the mountain. No, he wasn't. Azazel was, and it tells you that quite clearly in all of their writings. And he went up there, and he came down, and he said that they have a. Oh, what was it they made? A lamb of gold or something?
Yeah, no, it's a golden bull calf.
The bull calf, that's it. And they burned it, and it turned to a white powder. You try that. The point is, this is known science now. I went to a university, I won't say where, but I went to see this actually happen.
Interestingly, Lot's wife also turned into a pillar of salt.
Exactly.
Now,
monatomic gold. Anyone interested? Make a note of that. Go and read it. Rediscovered in 1958 by David Hudson. Research done by universities across the world, described by scientists as the most exotic matter ever discovered, and it will remain that way. It reduces mass. I believe this is what they painted the wingtips with on the stealth plane, the first one. It reduces the mass of things. Quite.
Distance dimensional.
It's yeah. What it's doing is sending part of the mass. If these are the 3 dimensions you live in, it's sending part of its mass into here. But the thing is, in a blinding flash of white light as well. Cold white light, cold fire. You come across this? Cold fire, ancient thing. You saw it on 9/11 as well. There's fires on the ground, cars burning, papers not burning. Cold fire.
Some people say that the pyramids were built because the way that they're taking this gold and
I believe the process in the Great Pyramid made monatomic gold.
Yeah,
I do.
and
Yes.
the blocks actually became weightless, so they were like concentric blocks.
I believe there was an element of that, but you wouldn't really use monatomic gold to do that. I don't think. I think that's resonance physics. I've seen it done.
Oh,
It's,
right.
it's done today.
Oh,
It can be done.
that's sound vibration.
Sound,
isn't it?
vibration, yeah. And
The
in this,
story of
in this
the
lecture today, I've given you the frequency to do it as well. It's in front of your face. Well, it was. Remember I said earlier on, we're talking about the Schumann resonance, yeah?
Yeah,
And I said one of its harmonics is 2.73.
yeah.
2732. Try that harmonic, you'll find things will float. Can't prove it to you. You really need a good oscillator bank. I've got a Mini Moog synthesizer, but even that's not really good enough to do the science. Anyway, so here's the point I wanted to make to you about monatomic gold, the lady I was speaking to earlier. In experiments, it's been proven that the white powder gold transmutes 44% of its mass. And when you put 56, which is what's left, over the 44, 1.273 comes out. What does all of this mean? I'll come back to that. What all of this means is that mass can be reduced. It goes somewhere. It goes somewhere and you can call it back. This is transmutation. Gold into white powder. Transmutation. The alchemist, not made up. There he is describing it centuries ago. And he got it from the ancient biblical stuff. And trust me, the biblical stuff that people like the Templars, Sarkani Rand as their teaching wing in Hungary. Eyes on Hungary nowadays, folks. You might just be running there soon. I might be anyway, as this country goes down the Swanee. I take that back actually. I'm proud British and I want to fight the fight here. We can change this.
Yes.
The moment people realise what's in charge and how they can be taken down. So we've done monatomic gold. Anyone heard of the 4th phase of water? It's called the easy water, exclusion zone water. Now, a friend of mine, Jerry McLaughlin, in London, she does craniosacral therapy, and is always very interested. She wants to get to the bottom of the science, and she kind of. So I pointed out easy water to her because I think it's the basis of homeopathy. I think it's absolutely definitively so. Show it to a homeopath and they'll freak because you're showing them something that, you see, they don't know what they're doing. It works. They don't know what they're doing. They have a spiritual control over what they're doing, but you couldn't say what the science is. Well, here's the science. He's discovered that water, ordinary water, if you drop it on, imagine on a mirror, the water will roll. The mirror's not very welcoming to water. Put some on wood, that's more welcoming. Yeah. Put some on Teflon, that's less welcoming. If you put water on anything that does not reject and repel water, it immediately creates a very thin film, which is huge in microscopic terms, it's very wide, of exclusion zone water, as they call it. It excludes all imperfections, everything. It's perfectly pure. Think of it as a very, very light gel. All right? More to the point, it has a different electric charge. This happens naturally. Due to ultraviolet light, which is going to be there all the time, it creates its own charge. It creates an ion gradient. This, I think, is actually the key to life. I think this is the life force coming out of water. It's where it's created. So anyway, Jerry posed some questions to him on my behalf, and hers, of course. And this is it. An ion gradient, this is me asking the question, may be seen as a fundamental process imparting a state to organic matter which we describe as life. Do you consider that the charge separation created by the presence of H3O2, that's easy water, a natural state of water, may be the key initiator of this gradient, or may it be the nexus of physics and chemistry we call life itself? Yes, he said, I think the charge separation associated with easy water is a fundamental attribute of life. It may be the energy that powers what we do. I believe it is. Combined with the prime number stuff which are given to him. I know I'm out on a limb with it, he says, with regard to that, but perhaps it's worth putting out there. This one is the most interesting one to me, because I pointed out to him that this number 2732 that I've come across so much, which when reciprocated is 366. There's so many occurrences of this in nature, which I've shown you, and that was only a fraction of them. He said that his analysis shows a light absorption, so this easy water absorbs light at a frequency of 27 nanometers, 270 nanometers. And that was an interesting number, because it's kind of 2732, but there ain't no 32 there. Bearing in mind that these things operate on different scales, I thought I'd ask, could it lie within a margin of error whereby it could actually be 273.2 instead of 270? And he said there's no speculation there on his part, but I've got to admit that 27 comes up in my lab again and again. Earlier we found that muscles contract in a series of little steps with pauses in between, always 2.7. You therapists there who are into muscles, you really need to get onto this. I can assure you it transforms an awful lot. What I'm saying is there's a way to apply that science to your patient. And you don't need machines. So, step size is always 2.71 nanometers or integer multiples thereof. Perhaps you're onto something. Coming from a top scientist like him, I was quite chuffed that he said that. Because obviously this is a huge proposal I'm making. Anyway, here's some more of that number. The Moon and Earth system literally is the circle squared.
That's alchemy, isn't it?
Do you think that happened by chance? No. This planet was geo-engineered, is put here. Or at least the Moon was. Absolutely, provably so. This couldn't happen by chance. It couldn't end up in the place where you have a total eclipse of the sun by chance. Not in the... Well, you know what I'm saying.
John Lear says it was dragged into orbit, and the ship that dragged it into orbit is still in a crater on the Moon.
It could well be. It could well be. So, Tesla. Many of you will have heard of Tesla. This is what they didn't teach you about at school. Now, some of you might not know this little interesting fact. I'm not claiming glory here, but I think I was the first person to, in the UK or anywhere in the truth movement, to point out this fact. But I got it from a book, so they were really the first ones to do it. That was a reprint of some banned books about the history of Britain, which if I really want to wind you up, I can get into. But should I?
Yes.
Well, I can only hit you with ideas. You know where Jerusalem is? Do you know where it was? It's what used to be Edinburgh. Babylon was York. Alright? And this goes much, much deeper than that. Everything you read in the Bible about the Jews and the Exodus happened on these islands.
Yeah, islands.
And these islands were different back then. This was prior to the initial flooding that took out Doggerland which I propose was what you would call Atlantis. And I propose that the pyramid builders actually show you that, as they agree and so on. Why? We go back to the pyramid, slope angle 51.51, cotangent, which is what the Egyptians used. They encode everything around, constructing around cotangents, not angles. 51.51 degrees north, 2.732 degrees east. Put it into Google Earth, see where you end up. It's Doggerland. It's the sunken Doggerland. These were the pyramid builders, and they were here before they ever went out there. Now there's a whole history there which I can't get into without doing a special talk on it, but
Special talk.
you should see the map of these islands as it kind of was and what
I
was
think
where.
I'll come back.
Yeah. Anyway, Tesla's stuff was taken by Donald Trump's uncle, who was an FBI appointed scientist. He was a real top scientist, incidentally, not just some muggins. And he took all of Tesla's stuff. So if you think Donald Trump is not aware of this, you need to think again. And he's going to be bringing this technology in the minute he can get rid of the swamp. Who have been stopping it? You UFO fiends, you were about to have disclosure given to you by John Podesta and Hillary Clinton. That's what they were going to do.
Oh, that's complete commercial.
It's all made up. They were going to indoctrinate you into that. John Podesta, the pedophile. Did anyone read Hillary Clinton's emails?
Yeah.
You've probably, oh, the Russians took them. No, they were given by someone who worked in the DNC, took it out on a pen, gave all of this stuff.
But don't they
Read
want
the
to bring that-
emails. Read the emails, is what I'm saying.
Don't they want to bring that in to bring New World Order and stuff to have a fake alien invasion?
That's what.
Everyone.
No, they were going to do disclosure, so they'd have told you some facts. I think they were going to at least reveal the first secret space program, but there's, I think, 15 or something crazy. It was a limited hangout, they call it. But I don't need to go into that because I don't know what they were going to reveal. But I do know that if you trust people like John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, the greatest satanic liars you'll find in global politics, and perverts, you're going to see stuff about Hillary Clinton that you would not imagine was true, but it's coming out.
I think it's just evil.
She's the epitome of flipping evil. Like, she was ISIS. She was going to be Queen of America, Queen of the world, literally, by being American president. ISIS, in their little club, she was ISIS. And I predicted just before it happened, she was going to be unveiled. And she was. And it was brilliant. God bless Donald Trump, is all I No, he knows this stuff. He's been America, Queen of the world, literally, by being American president. ISIS, in their little club, she was ISIS. And I predicted just before it happened, she was going to be unveiled. And she was. And it was brilliant. God bless Donald Trump, is all I No, he knows this stuff. He's been a conspiracy theorist learning this stuff for 40 years, just like me. What he knows, you will find out, I'm sure, once we can get rid of this scum. My brain is only a receiver in the universe. There is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I've not penetrated into the secrets of this, but I know it exists. I've just shown you. It's the fourth dimension. This is what he worked with. He didn't have the prime. If he had the prime number stuff, I can't imagine what he would have done with it. This world would be so different. It would be if we just used his standard stuff. It would be easy to view the prime number cross as just another expression of universal symmetry propagated by scientists in a continued reductionist decline. At first sight, you could be forgiven for thinking that prime number cross shows reality to be mechanistic or machine-like, with a simple command code underlying all other functions in four-dimensional space, including physics. But you're wrong, as it proves the exact opposite. The numbers themselves not only create our three-dimensional reality, but encode that reality with infinite possibility and free will. It does not present a mechanical framework, but a wholly creative one where all possibilities are generated by the simple +1 - 1 function around multiples of 6. Bit of a disconnect there, but that will mean something to you given time. This is a dipole model. It requires no monopole like the standard model of physics does. Such a thing actually can't exist. You could almost say, I'd say literally, we are polarized, crystallized light. That's what life forms are. The electric universe model, do look it up if you're not aware of that. It's incredible. It's right. It's what's long been known, but it's really coming out now. I propose that the prime number crosses the math that for their model, because they're still trying to write the math for it. I think they're getting a bit too complex if they do -1 + 1. And you see what relevance that is to the electric universe. It literally is. If this knowledge were already known by someone who wanted to hide it and use it for personal power and wealth, they could do so by mystifying its origins, functions, and meaning. Kabbalah would be a good example of that. Sacred geometry, another. Gematria, another. And here's the mention earlier, David, of tarot, chess, Go, I Ching, all based upon pi and the square of the octave, that's 64. They literally resonate with creation. They literally do. So, if the secret numbers was the lost science of antediluvian times, the holy grail of science and creation, what other secrets were known and passed down through certain bloodlines? Well, clearly navigation, ancient maps, we've seen all of them, maybe. Architecture. Look at the work of Bradbury, Corton and Dahl. The Mysteries of Francis Bacon. He, through his work, showed me that I lived here, by the way. My mum and dad lived just half a mile that way. I was brought up here. It's quite emotional coming back here today. They died just 3 or 4 years ago. It's kind of amazing. If anyone was going to be the power man in our family, it would have been my dad, sort of thing, you know. My mum was the housewife and something. No. She comes from a family line, the Bidwells, the Biddulphs, it turns out to be, which is the Bacon family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Unfortunately, my mum had died before I could tell her that bit, but
She'll know now.
she'll know that. Science, so we've got chemistry, alchemy, maths, geometry, numbers, occult, monatomic gold. Monatomic gold was introduced in ancient times as a way of replacing starfire. Do you know what starfire was? It was the menstrual blood. The menstrual blood was fed to the pharaohs.
Ooh.
The menstrual blood of his, not his queens, but his starfire maidens.
What's your take on this about the Anunnaki? Because the story of the Anunnaki said that they came to the earth to mine gold, but I think it was monatomic gold.
Well, they came to
Well,
the
no,
earth
you
to
see
mine
that-
ohms.
Yes, that's what I said 10 years ago. If they came to do that, they came for monatomic gold, certainly. But why would you do that? Why would you mine gold when you could go and find an asteroid that's the size of the moon and is made out of gold, because they exist out there? It didn't make sense. It still doesn't. I think the Anunnaki, so I tried this in the car on the way down, it fell flat, but if the Anunnaki existed, what colour were they?
It's debatable because...
No, just answer. Don't debate.
Well, I think they were probably white.
There you go.
Right.
That's the answer I'm looking for. Why? Why are the whites being told nowadays that they're the racists and so on? No, I think it's part of what's going down anyway. No one's an expert on that, but the Anunnaki thing, if they came for gold, it would have been for monatomic purposes, absolutely. Because ingesting monatomic gold heals all illness. DNA is corrected, everything is put right by one atom of monatomic gold. You don't need a spoonful. So don't go buying these things that some of the New Age shops are selling, because they don't have the technology to make this stuff. It's really high tech. Pharaohs made it without machinery, but it was to replace the menstrual blood. This is why the occults, some of the occultists do it to this day, and some of them eat bodies and all sorts of that. A perversion of an original
So that's the
scientific
original
truth.
child sacrifice thing, isn't it?
Oh.
It's horrible. And child sacrifice, it does go on. Anyway, religions would be the other way, but in particular the Abrahamic religions. The New World Order is trying to create a merging of the Abrahamic religions under one global religion.
That makes sense.
And money is the other one. Yeah, you see, I told you I mentioned money today. That's what the talk was supposed to be about. So what have they been hiding for so many centuries, which has given certain wealthy families and corporations control of humanity? In 1705, the philosopher wrote, money and trade, there it is. The key to alchemy, he said, was the printing of paper money. And he set up a scheme to do this, and it collapsed. Shit, but there you go. Money itself is alchemical in that it permits the holder to convert one thing into another. That's magic.
Yeah.
But it is a myth. The paper money is created out of nothing for the simple reason that it's issued against your energy, time, labour and resource, rather than a gold reserve. Talking about fiat currencies, you've probably been taught fiat currency is the bad. They have control over you. You've got a worthless fiat currency. Absolutely not. It's exactly what we need. A fiat currency linked only to your nation's wealth. That's it. That's what it always was, and that's what it always should be. Currency issued debt-free by that nation itself, not one global currency. End of. Pure fiat currency, because that's natural. It's all you'd ever have.
It's difficult to trade without something.
The minute you the minute you prop it up with gold, the goldsmiths own everything. And that's how the crime started. So, although Trump will, I think, put a gold standard into place, I see that as a transitionary bridge. I wrote to him on this, you know. Boy, did that bring down a lot of shit. I actually had to handwrite this letter. Handwrite it, not on the computer, handwrite it and post it. Why would I do that? Am I paranoid? Am I afraid of agents? Because if you don't do that, they'll see everything that you say and so on. And look what they're doing now, they're tracking it right back to this country. As I've pointed out, Britain is the one who spied on Donald Trump's campaign, and there's some really heavy shit coming as a result of this. Britain is the one who did it when Obama came over. Anyway, that's why it was called bread, by the way. Did you see that bit? I know I didn't speak out. In The Secrets of the Temple, he talks about how the Federal Reserve runs the country. Above all, money is a function of faith, and it requires an implicit and universal social consent that is indeed mysterious. To create money and use it, you must believe in it. We know that. Only then do the worthless pieces of paper take on value. But when they do, they've got value, as long as you believe in it. When a society loses faith in itself, the money process requires a deep act of faith. That's what they're doing when a society loses faith in itself. It's being eroded. It's so mysterious that it could be confused with divine powers. Money is alchemy, quite literally. And fiat currency isn't bad. I'll do a whole talk on that if anyone wants it. Alchemy, money and bread, yes. The money originally came from 3000 BC in the temples of Ishtar. It was created for a religious rite of sacred prostitution. This is true. They'll even teach you this in banking school if you go deep enough. The priestesses of the fertility goddess served by offering themselves as representatives. It was thought that if men simulated intercourse with the goddess, this would stimulate fertility in the land. I tried that. Fucking doesn't. Just makes a mess. Anyway, an important part of the ritual was the donation. See, donations. I've worded this well. The donation that occurred beforehand, you can imagine what that was. The worshipper was expected to make offerings in the form of wheat. Blah, blah, blah. This is why money was identified with bread. But it was a priestly thing. And the priesthood and the financiers have always been one thing. Who did Jesus kick out of the temple? Anyone?
Money changers.
Oh, you said it right. No, often people say the money lenders. So money changers that are kicked out, not the lenders. And there's good reason for that. Anyway, have you noticed how architecture, astrology, gematria, Kabbalah, geometry, numbers, as above so below, family bloodlines and money keep coming into the equation? Court Nindal established a direct family connection between Francis Bacon and the De Veres and the De Mole's, Jacques de Molay, temple who got burned. and those around him, such as John Dee, Queen Elizabeth, Elias Ashmole. You can see why that was interesting to me. It's, my whole life just opened up to be told that my mum's family was linked to all of these guys. Are you aware that John Dee was the original 007 Secret Service agent, quite literally? Are you aware that this Enochian invocation, the first scientific investigation into angels and psychic phenomena, which is what he did, is the basis of modern Western occultism, Crowley occultism, basically? What if occult ritual was a complete scam to engage the wealthy? And believe me, it attracts the wealthy. But simple minds, wealthy but simple minds, trapped by mammon worship. What if Kabbalah itself is a scam? Shakespeare was in fact more than one character. The names are recorded in history. He just may choose not to believe it. If you read Cortland Dahl's work on this, you'll weep. He fills out the gaps in what was there to be seen, from Oak Island to Shakespeare to the Templars. He really does. His stuff isn't on the Oak Island TV series. It should be. Prime numbers and octagons. These wealthy people went round the world because they could. They went round the world a long, long time ago and marked out their land using octagon markers. The Freemasons use it to this day. Blythe Park has one in the middle of it. And what you can do is you line up the sides of the octagon. It won't be all of them, but one of those sides will point to the next octagon. And Blythe goes up to the estate near Seton Delaware, and so on. It's everywhere. Everywhere. They laid claim to the land. They own it, not you. They got together and agreed that they wouldn't tell you. All other battles could be fought openly or subjected to agreement called the Shin. It's a century, I think a century, or is it 2 centuries, I do forget. It won't be mentioned. And they'll swap sides as to who's in control. And the deception is kept for an agreed contractual period. Only the Black Knight can call them out according to their own Grail mythology. The last talk I actually did, I staged that. I staged it. I was the Black Knight. If they'd been watching, I did the Black Knight call out on them.
So you prophesied to
Just
them,
for a bit
didn't you?
of fun. Just for a bit of fun.
That's not fun,
To
is
see
it?
who it would F up. And the answer was me. Yeah, that's who it messes up. They don't let you get away with stuff like that. I don't mean to sound like I know who these people are by name. Don't. From here, many commentators would branch off into the story of the Anunnaki and ancient aliens, of which you are clearly aware. I'm just asking you to perhaps consider that we are today believing what we have been taught to believe. There's no doubt UFOs exist. You've seen them with your own eyes. I've seen them with my own eyes, but there's enough to see. You'd have to be mad to think they don't exist. The only question is, what are they? The Anunnaki story clearly progresses to incorporate the Abrahamic creation stories and the development of these global religions into the mess we have today. But have you stopped to consider, if the deception goes deeper, what if the Old and New Testament is based upon real, credible happenings, which are so explosive as to bring down every religious and political power on earth? And they are, not least of which, everyone's fighting over Jerusalem. You're glad they're not fighting over Edinburgh, aren't you? Do you think the elites would? Do you think the elites would allow that in their little Garden of Eden? I have the grid reference of the first temple, which came from the Priory of Zion. You can go to Scotland and see it. That's another talk. I'll happily do that if you want.
Yes, please.
No one has done that in this country. And it is the most dangerous subject to cover, I can assure you. I didn't cover it 20 years ago when I was doing money. You think talking about the banking scam is a dangerous thing in banking circles. Talking about that is very dangerous, because you'll find out who your elites are and where they are, if it hasn't dawned on you already. Anyway, so don't get confused by the UFO stuff or the alien stuff. Dead Sea Scrolls printed on vermilion sheepskin. Strange. Didn't have that 2,000 years ago. I believe the Knights Templar wrote the scrolls. They wrote the scrolls from biblical documents that they gathered in their time. They wrote the scrolls. to implant the religion out there in the East. Because you may or may not know, Jerusalem wasn't, none of these places were known. Was it Constantine sent his wife out to go find them, and lo and behold, she found bits of the cross, and Jerusalem became Jerusalem. That history is all made up. Moses ben Maimon, celebrated rabbi of Cairo, said that every time you find in our books a tale the reality of which seems impossible, repugnant to both reason and common sense, then to be sure it contains a profound allegory veiling a deep mysterious truth. The greater the absurdity of the letter, the deeper the wisdom of spirit. Who shall find out the true sense of the book of Genesis, ought to take care not to divulge it. That's where I found the grid references. And above all, the work of 6 days. That's the prime number cross. 144,000, the definition of light, the first 6 rings. If a person should discover the true meaning of it, by himself or by the aid of another, then he ought to be silent. Or if he speaks, he ought to speak of it obscurely in an enigmatical manner. As you can see, I've been struggling to do today. It's the only way to do it. Believe me, but there's so much more can be said on all of that. Zionism versus Bolshevism. This was written by Winston Churchill. You can't read it very clearly here. But this is just to point out that back in Churchill's time, 1920, he was very, very much onto the Zionism thing. And the Bolsheviks, who were, of course, financed by elite bankers and so on. The entire creation of the left was created by elite bankers. Their names are even, we know, it's a story that's been proven many times over. So he was into it. A lot of people don't know that Judea did declare war on Germany. This is 6 years prior to Germany declaring war against the Jews. Yeah, this is what gets him called a Nazi for pointing out historical fact. World War II was not caused for the reasons that they told you. There was a much bigger story, and yes, it had a lot to do with the Jews, the international bankers, and so on, isn't it? Well, Hitler told you that himself. I'm not telling you any secrets. But Judea declared war on him. That's the way it went down in history. That's what Churchill said about them. And please bear in mind, I'm not talking about the Jews, I'm talking about certain Jews, and I'll define them for you shortly. But this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of an arrested development of envious malevolence. Is this ringing bells with you today? An impossible equality. Communists want equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. That is not a natural order. It cannot be attained except through violent force. That's what the left is. That's what they're there to do. That is the Illuminati. They are the opposing force. That's not to say the Tories aren't. No. You might, but communism is your Illuminati, not your rich capitalists. Some call it Marxism, I call it Judaism. You tell this to these Marxist fanatics that are out on the street, yeah? You tell it to Obama, who's a Marxist fanatic, a trained one. You might know that story as a community organiser. I was interviewed for that job. I got interviews as a community organiser and I didn't know if I messed them up. That was, but I think to this day I'm the only person to retain all the questions that they ask you because you're not allowed to tell people. I didn't take it as far as getting the job. I told them what they could do with it once I'd had my interview. If you aren't sure about what socialism itself is, there it is. Founding of Jewish societies of agriculture, industry and trade in accordance with Mosaic law, that's socialist law. This is Encyclopedia Judaica. Please don't ever call me an anti-Semite for pointing out what they themselves say. That's the greatest research document, 22 books, strangely. 22 books. It tells you so much that people are even afraid to speak about. But anyway, I just thought I would show you that to prove the point. What is the left-hand path? socialism, communism and Marxism are the shadow trinity. Yes, this does involve the Labour Party as well. Its core doctrine is Mosaic law, and it's quite literally Satanist in its method, playing the role of the opposition to human progress. As I said to the Labour leader, why don't you tell people that the currency can be issued debt-free? Why don't you do that? Why won't you do that?
Did you get an answer?
He couldn't, well, you can't, because the answer is, because I'm a socialist, and if I do that, that makes me a national socialist. That's what the Nazis were. They were all well, national socialists. Nothing to do with right wing.
Did he get rid of the
Lord
net worth?
Haw-Haw, what was he? He was an MP, socialist MP. The other guy, the famous guy. They were all socialist MPs. And 2 MPs on the right spoke out at the time of World War II, and they locked him up for the duration. This is what goes on, always has, still does. Don't lose sight of the fact that Nazis were socialists. That's, well, we're all celebrating all these things. I thought this was amusing when so I'm talking here about, in particular, how they're using psychological tools and the Hegelian dialectic and everything, and suddenly women are celebrated, trans are celebrated, everything has to be celebrated. They're actually socially engineering everything.
Oh dear.
So McDonald's actually, for Women's Day, turned their M upside down to make a W. But to me it looks like a pair of floppy tits, doesn't it to you? I'm being waved at. So we'll skip the bigger bit. BBC brainwashing for all of us, and with all this talk of fascism, please do note, this is real. There was a concerted media and social engineering project by the establishment to disassociate in your mind the direct relationship between socialism and fascism. This is what we're watching in this country develop rapidly. And the BBC were prime actors in this deception. That's the name I was looking for. Fascist Oswald Mosley was also a socialist. These people are socialists. Don't lose sight of the fact. It's not cool to be a socialist. It's really not. My thought on Europa. This is fact. Edward Heath took Britain into Europe. He reassured us we'd have our sovereignty and it wouldn't be affected. There's no question of Britain losing its sovereignty, etc. That was the entire plan, was for us to lose our sovereignty. They lied and they crept in. He, of course, was a German asset. This is known. He was a DVD, German secret police asset. They got him because he was a pedophile. That's how they hooked him. That's how they hooked them all with their pedophile ring. And he sacrificed and murdered kids after raping them on his boat. This is now absolute frigging fact, and it's disgusting. And that's the man who took us into Europe.
That all discussed and all this thing I have something like that.
They literally are. Well, there you go. This is the plan for Europe, incidentally. If you can read German, I'll show you the whole document. But there it is. This is the EU. This is the EU.
Yes.
Their building is that, the Tower of Babel. And here's the Pope kissing the hand of the guy who runs your world. And he's not just a Jew. Around 586 BC, the first temple was destroyed and the Jews were exiled to Babylonia. That's York, by the way. They kicked him out of Jerusalem, Edinburgh, down to York. This was the true story, but it goes much deeper than that. Many among those priests abandoned the teachers of Moses and embraced Satanism and magic. That's what you're up against and always have been. It's not the Jews, it's Kabbalists. Alright? Who happen to be Jews.
Well, there's the pin.
Who happen to own most of the Flaming Banks too, then, yeah?
Would he be the Pindar?
You did, that's probably a name that, yes.
Pindar, penis of the snake.
That's probably a name that would be used. Look how pleased he is to see Donald Trump compared to Mr. Obama. Yeah, absolutely in it. I know a photo proves nothing, but this is the reality. Obama was, You know he wasn't born in America, don't you? You know when
Yeah.
Trump started the birther thing, as they call it, saying that he hasn't got a birth certificate and he's not American, he couldn't prove it. He finally came up with one, and it's been forensically proven by the world's top labs. It's a fake. This is the truth. The media won't report it. Not only is it a fake, but so is he. He was bred to be president. In fact, just to take it a step further, many have been bred to be presidents and prime ministers by this group. He is of the seed of Akhenaten. He is a clone. He's been cloned in a way, bred. Clone isn't the word. From Akhenaten's DNA.
Almost all of the presidents are actually related to each other. They're all part of one
Yep.
family.
These
including
people-
the royal family as well. and
Yeah,
including
absolutely.
many others.
Our royal family is actually at the head of this, and it's not an easy one to take on. So that was her concession speech. It's like, I bloody applauded that day. It was just incredible. This witch thought she was going to win. Nobody, because they had it all fiddled anyway. Trump's intelligence, well not Trump's, the military intelligence knew how they fiddled it, and they bloody stopped them. Same in Britain, by the way. That's why they kicked off in Britain. No one was expecting that. They fiddled it, and we still beat them. Anyway, there's an interesting thing. Purple and your fish hats and so on. This is the organisation that's behind it all. And of course the Trump-Russia myth was entirely created, as is now proven, but your media don't want to report it to you. They still want you to think Russia, Russia, Russia. Let me assure you there is one country that is a real serious problem to us and does intend not only to invade Canada and other places, but to take us down. They own 40% of our ports already. This is China. You need to keep an eye on what's going on. One of Hillary's emails, by the way, just one out of interest. All right. Now, of course, that can mean anything, but why was the Secretary of State putting that in her?
I will be.
And there's so much more you can read there. Seriously, you would not comprehend some of the stuff that she's into. And that's why they're panicking. It's out there. You can see for yourself. And that's just, I think, the closing picture. What the hell do you think you're doing? Trump draining a swamp. No, that's the closing picture. That's their capital city. You might think that they're Zionists going to Jerusalem and setting up the good state of Greater Israel and so on. That's not like that. They built this. This is in Kazakhstan. Yeah. All right. This is where they're going to. This is what they're doing.
They've got that perfect thing.
Look at the
triangles
wealth
and that.
here. Look at the
Eh,
wealth here.
Interestingly, the International Spaceport is in Astana in Kazakhstan.
No, yeah. Well, I didn't know that, mate. So that is a really interesting. This is their New World Order capital.
Right.
Where is this?
Sorry?
Where is Kazakhstan?
Kazakhstan. Russia way.
Russia
I think.
way.
It's like southern Russia.
Southern Russia. And I do think, yeah, I think that's it. So,
Thank you.
beyond that, I have the space mirror for anyone who wants to look into it.